we begin, I do wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional home of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work, and for many of us to live on this land. I always think it's important at these events to acknowledge the First Nations, the Indigenous people, who were the original stewards of this land. I often walk on Philosopher's Walk close by, which, as many of you know, used to be a beautiful creek stewarded by the Indigenous peoples who were first here. Now the creek is buried, and while it's still a beautiful place, we see what has happened to the land, and hopefully by working with the Indigenous peoples who lived here, we can begin to figure out how to restore these lands as they were hundreds of years ago. So, as we gather here today in celebration of Asian Heritage Month, it really is my honor to welcome all of you to the University of Toronto Libraries, to the University of Toronto, and to the Cheng Tung East Asian Library. This library stands as a testament to the richness and depth of Asian culture, and is a vital resource for scholars both at the University of Toronto, but also from across Canada. We have many scholars who come here from all over Canada, but also from North America. I'm going to stand back. Maybe that will keep it from feedback. It really is part of the libraries that is a Canadian treasure and a resource for all Canadians, but also scholars from literally around the world. Within these walls, we house a treasure trove, not just in these walls. Some of them are in storage in our preservation facility where they're well preserved, and in the basement of this library, it is a truly vast collection. But it is a treasure trove of literary gems spanning centuries, continents, literally, I guess, thousands of years in some cases, at least well over 1,000 years. And it's from the verses of Chinese, the beautiful, incredible verses of Chinese poetry, to the intricate narratives of Japanese literature, and from the extraordinary stories of Korean folklore to the spiritual wisdom that is encapsulated in our Tibetan texts that are housed in a part of this library. But the significance extends far beyond the preservation within these walls of all of these works. It serves as a vital conduit. It connects members of the Asian diaspora to cultural roots, provides inspiration, I hope, and it provides a sense of belonging in a world that today is all too fraught. So as we celebrate Asian Heritage Month, we recognize the importance of amplifying truly authentic voices in literature, voices that speak not only of triumph and tribulation, but also of the experiences, the nuanced experiences, the many, many experiences that have shaped the Asian Canadian identity. So again, it is a great excitement. This is an exciting occasion that we welcome some really, truly powerhouse writers today sitting down here on the front row where the theme of recovery will be explored. Still hearing some feedback. Stand back further. And I hope I get all the names correct. I apologize in advance if I don't. But I want to extend my thanks and gratitude to the panelists, Marjorie Chan, Denise, and Hannah's going to introduce them again, I think, more in a few minutes. But Marjorie Chan, Denise Chong, Jenica Oza, Linda Rui Fing, and our moderator, Professor Larissa Lai, for gracing us with their time, spending this afternoon with us and sharing their lived experiences. I know their insights and perspectives are sure to create a lively and enlightening discussion that will resonate far beyond these walls and far beyond today. So again, we're so excited to have all of you here with us, and I thank you for joining us today. In celebrating our diversity, I also want to reaffirm our commitment at the University of Toronto Libraries to fostering an inclusive and equitable society where we hope every voice is heard, where we build collections that are deeply diverse, not just in the East Asian Library, but across the 40 libraries at the U of T, where every story is valued, where every heritage is celebrated, where we preserve for 100, 200, 300 years from now, the cultural record of many different peoples, the historical record of many different countries and peoples, and the research record that is so important to building new knowledge and new research. And this library, the East Asian Library, stands at the heart of preserving all of those records. It really is a place where knowledge, I think, transcends boundaries. So I hope in this journey this afternoon and overall we can use the power of literature to really bridge divides, to foster empathy and to inspire change, and really celebrate the richness of our collective heritage, but especially the richness of the heritage contained within this amazing library. So thank you all again for coming today. And I also want to I'm delighted to be able to recognize and thank our partner in this event, the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop and their representative, Jeannie Fong-Garard. Thank you so much for being here as well. I think Hannah will also introduce you again later, but I wanted to acknowledge and thank you all for your partnership in making this possible. So, with apologies, I actually am double scheduled today. We're also hosting in the Fisher Library next door what are called the undergraduate library, that goes back to 40 years ago when I worked in an undergraduate library. The Undergraduate Research Library Prize Award. It's actually 6 undergraduates who've done some amazing work, and it's a juried award. I'm the one that's actually giving out the awards with the provost, so I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes to go join that, for which I apologize because I was really excited to be at this event. I'm going to stay as long as I can in the back of the room. And again, thank you all for coming. Thank you all, the panelists. Thank you, Jeannie, for your partnership with this. And now I'm going to turn it over to Hannah Kim, who's going to really introduce the event and introduce the participants.
Thank you very much, Larry. So hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Kim. I'm the director of the Cheng East Asian Library here at the University of Toronto. Thank you all for joining us on this very, very special occasion. We are thrilled to host the LiterASIAN Toronto Festival 2024, an extension of the festival in Vancouver, in partnership with the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, ACWW. Our library previously, as you remember, some of you have attended in the past, hosted LiterASIAN in 2018 and 2019. And we had a long pause during the pandemic, which was very, very unfortunate. But we are so pleased to resume this festival this year again. So this event is generously sponsored by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Canadian Authors Association in Toronto. LiterASIAN proudly celebrates Canadian writers and artists of Asian heritage and their valuable contributions to Canada's vibrant literary and artistic scenes. In past festivals, we have featured amazing pioneers and authors of Asian Canadian literature, such as Joy Kogawa, Shani Mutu, Carrie Ann Leung, Thea Lim, Lynn Kuchikake, who's sitting right here in this row. She used to be working in this library as well. Chuck Kwan, Kai Chung Tom, Doreen Mack, and Sarah Lewis. This year, we have a fantastic lineup of writers, including Marjorie Cheng at the very front in red dress, Denise Chong, right, also in the front row, Janica Oza next to Denise, and Linda Ray Fang, who is also our faculty member at the University of Toronto, who is sitting right next to Janica. We are also honored to have our own Professor Larissa Lai, the Richard Charles Lee Chair of Chinese Canadian Studies at the University of Toronto. And she was our keynote speaker in the last year's Asian Heritage Month in this library. And she will be joining us to moderate the panel. As we celebrate Asian Heritage Month, the month of May provides an opportunity to explore the diverse cultures and histories of Asian communities in Canada, while recognizing the achievements and contributions of Canadians of Asian descent. Through raising awareness and shining a spotlight on the creative works of Asian Canadian artists, events like the LiterASIAN Festival offer a platform to emphasize the meaningful contributions Asians have made as settlers in our province and country. As we deepen our understanding of Asian Canadian histories, we discover the diverse communities that have overcome numerous racist obstacles and navigated various waves of immigration. Here at the East Asian Library, we recognize the challenges and barriers that Asian Canadians have faced. historically and in the present day. Discriminatory policies such as the head tax, internment, and the Komagata Maru incident have left lasting scars on many lives. To address this, our library has been developing Asian Canadian collections and archives and supporting Asian Canadian studies by connecting scholarly research with the East Asian Canadian community, which includes Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Taiwanese, and Tibetan Canadians. This year's festival theme is Recovery, which explores the journey of memory and healing. Today, we hope this session will provide us with an opportunity to reflect on what recovery means for us as Asian Canadians. So now, I'd like to invite Ginny from Gerard, representing our LiterASIAN partner, the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, and also serving as the co-president for the Canadian Authors Association's Toronto branch, our sponsor for the event, this very event, to share her remarks. Please join me welcoming Ms. Gerard.
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone. My name is Jeff Gerard and I'm here representing two organizations, the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop and the Canadian Authors Association. The Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, ACWW, is a not-for-profit organization based in Vancouver. And the purpose is to sponsor, supervise, stage, and promote literary events. LiterASIAN was started 12 years ago, so this is actually its 12th anniversary this year. And it's been organized annually by ACWW, and it features authors and other cultural activists all across Canada. Rice Paper Magazine is an online magazine published by ACWW, and it's free to read, and it promotes Asian writers as well. So if you're an Asian Canadian writer, feel free to look us up and send in submissions. And finally, ACWW also publishes books featuring Asian Canadian writers in collaboration with Dark Helix Press, and we have a table at the back featuring some of our books full of Asian Canadian authors. My other hat, I'm president of the Canadian Authors Association Toronto branch right now, and it's another organization that promotes writers. It was founded in 1921 by Stephen Leacock with some other fellow writers at the time as a lobby to protect authors' rights. So they do a lot of work in lobbying for copyright for authors, etc. And today we also provide opportunities for professional development and promoting equitable treatment of writers. So there's a lot of free events as well through CAA, the Canadian Authors Association, so feel free to look us up. And on behalf of both organizations, Asian Canadian Writers Workshop and Canadian Authors Association, we thank you for coming here to support us and listening to authors, because without readers, really the writers don't have a voice. So the fact that you're here to support us, we really thank you, and we need a lot of support. So thank you to the East Asian Library, University of Toronto, and Hannah Kim for making LiterASIAN happen again this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ginny. Okay, so now I'd like to invite our panel members to the front. So while they're settling, I just wanted to bring your attention to our book sale tables at the back of this room, right behind you. There are two tables. One is from University of Toronto bookstore. They're selling book publications from our authors today. And on the table right next to is the table that Ginny had just introduced to you, the publications from the other Asian Canadian writers from ACWW. So be a supporter for our writers. As Ginny mentioned, with our readers, there's no space for our authors to stand. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Professor Larissa Lai. Dr. Lai currently holds a joint appointment in the English department in University College at the University of Toronto and serves as the Richard Charles Lee Chair of Chinese Canadian Studies. Dr. Lai is the author of 9 books, including The Lost Century, The Tiger Flew, Saltfish Girl, and Iron Goddess of Mercy. She has received numerous awards, including the Jim Duggins Novelist Prize, the Lambda Literary Award, the Astrea Award, and the Otherwise Honor Book. Dr. Lai has also been a finalist for the Books in Canada First Novel Award and the Governor General's Award. She has held prestigious positions such as Canada Research Chair in Creative Writing at the University of Calgary, just before joining the U of T last year. And she was also a Maria Zambrano Fellowship Chair at the University of Huelva in Spain. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lai and our panelists.
Already did it, but I'm going to do it briefly again because it seems important to acknowledge the land. So I'd like to recognize that we're meeting on the traditional territories.
I think your sound is a little bit low.
Sound is low?
I don't think that back. Can you hear Larissa? No. Not really.
How's it now? Better?
Is it better?
Better. Okay, fantastic. It's a pain. Is it okay with this? It's okay?
Or you can
Move
then
the
why don't
stand.
you just use this and we can share it if this is not working. Because the sound is not strong.
The sound's not strong enough. Okay. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island live here, and we're grateful to have the chance to live and work on these lands. Today, we might wish to reflect on how the books we're discussing are connected to these territories, and in what relationship the stories they contain sit with existing stories that attach to this place. Now more than ever, we need complex stories about lands and the many beings who inhabit them to make sense of place and keep on living in this messy and troubled world. Today, we'll be discussing 2 novels, Janika Oza's A History of Burning and Linda Ruifeng's Swimming Back to Trout River. We'll also talk about a play, Marjorie Chan's Lady Sunrise, and we'll discuss a nonfiction biography, Denise Chong's Out of Darkness, Rumana Manzoor's journey through betrayal, tyranny, and abuse. The topic for today's session is recovery. Hannah and I chose this topic because we felt it to be a productive one that we hope will generate discussion amongst the authors and help us put the 4 books in conversation with one another. To recover can mean to get back something that was lost, as in, I've recovered my stolen handbag, or my brother recovered his lost passport. It can also mean to get better, to regain one's health after a long illness, or to find oneself able to walk again after breaking a leg. I hope we'll have a chance to talk about the injuries or traumas, and how story can be a way of recovering from them. I want to talk as well about the role of memory in recovery. We'll talk about what memory is and how it can help us recover the past. I'm hoping as well that we'll get a chance to talk about recovering our humanity from the banalities of stereotyping, especially in the wake of the latest wave of anti-Asian hate that emerged from the COVID pandemic. In this case, to talk about character complexity can be a political act. If there's time, we'll talk about what can be recovered from one generation to the next, the role of the imagination in recovery, and whether women storytellers and/or women protagonists, as well as perhaps queer or trans rememberers, disabled rememberers, whether they have a particular role to play. I'll mention as well, so as not to break the flow later, that there are other themes we could have chosen. Both Denise Chong and Linda Ruifeng's book address the experience of living with disability in nuanced and compassionate ways. Questions of race, class, and gendered power imbalances arise in all 4 books. And while I haven't prepared questions about how the conventions of different genres shape the way stories are told, this could be a very rich ground to explore. And while I have the chance to say so, I'd also like to thank the writers for the extraordinary books they've written. I had a simply incredible time reading your books in preparation for today's event. I learned a lot, I cried a lot, and I was very moved. I'm in awe of all four of you. Before we get to the discussion, I'm going to invite each of the four panelists to read for 5 to 6 minutes each. I'll introduce everyone now, and then invite you to read in the order I've introduced you. So, Janika Oza is a writer based in Toronto. She is the winner of the 2022 O. Henry Prize for Short Fiction and the 2020 Kenyon Review Short Fiction Contest. She has received fellowships and support from VONA, Tin House, One Story, the Malay Colony, the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Canada Council for the Arts. Her debut novel, A History of Burning, was shortlisted for the Governor-General's Award for English Language Fiction and the Amazon First Novel Award. Linda Ruifeng is both a fiction writer and a scholar of Chinese cultural history. Her prose and poems have appeared in such journals as The Fiddlehead, Kenyon Review Online, Nimrod, the St. Anne's Review, Santa Monica Review, Salamander, and Washington Square Review. Her first scholarly monograph, City of Marvel and Transformation, explores the connection between 9th century Chinese literature and the urban space of the capital city in the Tang Dynasty. Swimming Back to Trout River is her first novel. It was nominated for the Giller Prize and the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and long listed for the Penn Hemingway Award for debut novel and the Aspen Words Literary Prize. Born in Takaranto, otherwise known as Toronto, to settlers from Hong Kong, Marjorie Chan is the artistic director of Theatre Passe Muraille. As an award-winning interdisciplinary artist, she primarily identifies as a writer with specific interest in contemporary opera and collective forms, while also maintaining an active practice as a dramaturge and director. Marjorie also has a long history of working at the intersection of accessibility and dramaturgy, creating spaces and processes for more radical inclusivity in theater creation. Her full-length plays include Lady Sunrise, The Madness of the Square, A Nanking Winter, and Tales from the City. She's also written libretti for operas and won a stack of awards. We'll be here all afternoon if I name them. Lady Sunrise was produced at Factory Theatre in 2020. And last, but of course far from least, is Denise Cheng, an award-winning author whose work portrays the lives of ordinary people caught in the eye of history. Best known for her family memoir, The Concubine's Children, she is also the author of The Girl in the Picture, about the life of Kim Phuc, who as a young girl was photographed running from a napalm attack during the Vietnam War, and Egg on Mao, a story of love and defiance in China in 1989. She worked in the federal public service for a few years before focusing on her writing career, first as a business journalist and later as a biographer. She is a member of the Order of Canada and was shortlisted twice for the Governor-General's Award. She lives in Ottawa, and Out of Darkness is her newest book. So if you'd all give them a warm welcome, and then I'll invite Janika to read.
Hello. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Larissa, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here. It's really wonderful to be in this beautiful library space with all of you on campus. And I also want to acknowledge the student encampment in support of Palestine that's happening on this same campus right now. It's really an honor to witness that act of solidarity. So I'm going to read from my novel, A History of Burning, which begins with a 13-year-old boy named Pirbai, who is taken from his village in India by the British to labor on a railroad in East Africa. And the passage I'm going to read takes place 50 years later when Pirbai is on his deathbed. So this is Pirbai 1958. He wanted to run, was running, running. He and Rakesh flying, pinkies linked as they flew, bare feet opening to the dirt, blood spilling and still running, together they ran. Then moving too fast to hold on to each other, but still knowing they were side by side, the forest held them close, each other the reason they could run, the love of the other enough to go on. She was at his door, the hard woman, the wife, the stud in her nose, light in her heavy face. She had come to ask his help cleaning the storage room, perhaps to help him write a letter. But no, she was walking to him with a tin cup in her yellow-stained hands, and he was not sleeping on a gunny sack but a bed, and she was stroking his hair with her palm that was not smooth but calloused, old. She was old. His Sono. Her rough hands, but she was soft when they were alone. He remembered this and reached for her. Her lips parted, and he remembered the children, 3 of them. The memory surfaced more memories, never spoken aloud, swimming up from the blackest waters of his mind. An unnamed boy with a face like his cousin's slipping into the Kalapani, the beating he'd known after claiming Rakesh vanished in the fire, every bruised step a prayer that his friend was free. How the wife drank cassava tea after the birth of their son to close her womb, no more children. How his son read him a letter saying that Ganesh from the railway had returned to India and taken his own life. How when his son asked who that was, he said he didn't know, not knowing how to say that it was also himself. He had taken away people's homes, though he knew not whose. He had hoped, believed, it would secure his own. Had it? This sweet house, this house of sugar, they had once given that name to this place of rest. His wife brought the cup to his lips, and he smelled bitterness and ajmo and too much clove, which he knew she added to mask the unpleasant, though she would never say, but he knew it in his deepest self, so he drank. He remembered a girl. A baby in his arms, eyes so large and black and wet, moving like the sea. But in his memory, his arms were trembling and sun-pocked, not long ago then, so not his daughter. Granddaughter, he said. The wife nodded, yes, yes, we have 3 of those now, such relief in her face. She recited names that sparked no light, Latika, Mayuri, Kia. But he heard a voice outside that opened a shadow of a thought, a girl at the foot of his bed, tickling his toes through the blankets, a girl who turned her head to every sound, a girl unafraid to bear witness. He had seen in her that curiosity, no, that hunger for the truth. The eldest, he said, not knowing her name. Bring her to me. His wife eyed him uncertainly, hesitating, but then she relaxed as if understanding something and nodded. He relaxed too. This good woman who built a home in the unspoken parts of himself, how lucky he was to be seen by her, how lucky to be seen in life, to have had a true friend. The girl stood by his side, close enough that he could see, through the film of his eyes, her dress damp with sweat from playing outside. Close enough that he saw the tilt of her chin, the seriousness of her eyes older than her 10 years. But she held herself a little apart, not touching the bed, and he had the thought that she was afraid of him. The nub of his missing finger, the bristled hairs of his ears, the ridges of his spine pushing through his singlet like river stones. The smell of him, medicine and curdled breath and clove. Perhaps he had become something alien to her, ugly. He remembered then what his mother always told him, how his teeth were his finest feature, his inner strength, and he bared them now, wide and milky, gums black from years of beaties, crackling at the girl. She did not flinch or look away. He knew then that this was the one he remembered, the one he hoped for. Thank you.
At this moment, I just want to savor Yanika's reading and not be the one reading, but I'm very grateful to be here and to everyone who's made this happen, including the wonderful writers to my sides. In recognition of the theme of our panel, which is recovery, I'm reading a passage that I usually don't read from my novel. So in this scene, a musician who has arrived in San Francisco from mainland China in the early 80s has decided to stay in San Francisco. And so in order to do this, she basically shows up at the door of a cellist, of an Asian American cellist in San Francisco, and she's asking him for help. And to his surprise, she's, invited herself to his house. And the scene follows in which she shows him an object. "Let me show you something," she said, reaching into her pocket. The night before, she had put all her indispensable possessions on her person and into various pockets, so that at the right moment before their departure, she could leave her luggage in the van and tell the others she had to go to the bathroom. Now she took out one of these items, a thin piece of wood, and handed it to him. Edmund rolled it slightly between his thumb and index finger and looked at it as only a string player could, with recognition for its function and appreciation for its artistry. It was the bridge of a violin, the thing that gave tension to the strings and which transferred the vibrations to the instrument's acoustic center, its resonance chamber. "This violin seems to have some age on it," he said. "Was it yours?" "The violin is gone. The Red Guards smashed it during the Cultural Revolution," she told him. The story had to be simplified, she thought, for the sake of delivering the right message. When she later thought about the violin splintering apart in her hands, when the ebony of the fingerboard was sundered from the front and ribs, she realized it'd been the first time she truly understood its architecture. From among the carcass of the instrument, she spotted the otherwise hidden sound post inside the instrument's belly, now laid bare. She felt the futile resistance of the quarter-cut maple wood that had once been glued together with surgical precision to make up each half of the violin's back. "My grandfather wouldn't let me keep this last bit of it," she continued. "He didn't want me to get in trouble, but I fished it out of the trash and managed to hide it. I've kept it with me everywhere for 13 years now." Edmund ran his fingers over the hollowed-out spaces of the bridge. At its base, there was a pair of apertures known as the kidneys, and above them, a void that resembled the shape of a heart. For Dawn, the bridge had long ceased to be a structural component of an instrument and had become something known to her through its tactile texture inside her pocket. On its top edge, the curve was punctured by four shallow notches where the strings once sat. Dawn spent many hours running the pad of her thumb across the notches and, imagining it was each of the open strings she caressed, heard each note resonate in her mind's ear as she did so. This was the first time since the house raid that Dawn had let anyone see the bridge, much less touch it. "You've thought about doing this for a long time?" he asked. "It's hard to explain," she said.
everyone. I just want to first say, as a playwright, in fact, I don't very often get to engage directly with my text and an audience. It gets interpreted and put on a stage with actors, so I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share some of my work with you and with the fellow panelists. So I'm excited to share that with you. I'm going to read from, this is my latest straight play, text-based play called Latest Sunrise. It is inspired by Sunrise by Chow Yu. I was really inspired by those female characters that existed, written in 1930s, were quite extraordinary. And I was so inspired by them, I pulled them forward and reimagined many of them to be placed in Vancouver in 2005. Yes, I come from theater, but for me, I was very interested in performance. And for this particular play, which is of 6 women, the kind of performative aspect that Asian women in the diaspora have to engage in all the time to exist in society. The protagonist, or maybe antagonist, as some might say, is, I'm going to read from. Her name is Penny, but she goes by her name Lulu, if that gives you an idea of her. And she, she's a young woman who kind of made the pageant rounds in Hong Kong and through Vancouver, and we meet her about 5 years kind of after the height of all those things. She's in a luxury apartment in Richmond, and she speaks directly to the audience, and I will too. Penny is putting on lip gloss. Can you be addicted to lip gloss? You have to keep putting it on, like all the time. It's shiny, sure, but it never sticks. I have no idea why, but my lips are like crazy dry all the time. It must be, like the altitude, like penthouse, that's pretty high, right? I was supposed to go to this hoity-toity thing, a gala. Auntie wanted me to go, right? Back in the day, like way back, like the 80s, when, making money was real easy, Auntie was really popular. And not to be mean or anything, but it has been a long time since she was a looker. But still, she's on all these invite lists, because guess what? She's rich. Like stinking. P.U. Roll your R's rich. Anyway, she's the best. She's not like my real auntie, like for blood. It's more like she's my friend, like best friends, who do everything together, who shop together, go to dim sum together, get our nails done together. Oh, don't look at my nails. They look like trash. Like I pick fruit or raise goats or something. Gross. Okay, so Auntie wants me to go to this fancy thing tonight, right? She wants me to meet other people. She wants me to date someone nice. Like, oh my God, OMG, I can get my own dates. At one point, I made a decision for my own sanity and for how I want to live, right? I made a decision. I have to date a certain kind of guy. So this was a couple of years ago. There was this nice guy who I knew back in high school, so like I hadn't seen him forever. Like before the pageant stuff, before Hong Kong, so like so long ago. Like my last pageant was like almost 5 years ago. So this guy, out of nowhere, he finds me online and he sends me a DM, okay? I want to see you. You look amazing, etc., right? So I'm like, okay, come with me to the club tonight. It's a fashion thing. It will be fierce, I say. And then he's like, but I want to see you, not hang out in a club. He's so dumb. Like, this thing is open bar. I mean, come on, open bar. I wasn't gonna miss it. So we're there, right? I offer him a drink. He doesn't want it. Fine. I wanted to dance, and he didn't. He wanted to sit. Okay. I said, let's make out. And he takes my hand and says, let's talk. Talk? Amazing, right? So fine. We're gonna head back here. He's driving, but I reach over his lap to touch him. He swats my hand away. Total tease. And we get here, and I'm like, okay, maybe now we'll make out. Instead, he pulls out this book. I mean, it's a real book, like a real published book, but it's small, because get this, it's poetry, his poetry. Worse, here's the worst part. Inside, he signed it. He signed it for Penny. First of all, that's not my name anymore. That's my old name. And then second of all, he says, Penny for your thoughts. Like, I have never heard that before. And third of all, do we even have pennies anymore anyway? They're not worth anything. I mean, yeah, in high school, we did have a thing, the kind of thing teenagers have, writing each other love notes kind of thing, making out, staying up all night laughing, whatever. We were just kids. I had the pageants and modeling, so I was busy, back and forth to Hong Kong, the whole thing. No way I was going to stick with him. No way. His name's Tom, but I called him Tommy. And he would say, what? And I would say again, Tommy. And he would say, what? And we'd just go back and forth, Tommy, what? Tommy, what? And we're just laughing for no reason. It was like so silly. Anyway, I don't know how much a poet makes, but I'm pretty sure it's not enough. So anyway, when he gave me that book, that's when I made the decision about who I date, you know? I gotta look out for myself because no one will.
You remind me of why I love theater. And to my fellow writers and Larissa, who's also a fellow writer, it's a real treat to hear you speak. And I agree with Linda that you just want to savor it afterwards, just like the way, you're at the symphony and the music ends and you don't clap right away. You just want to let it sit for a minute, so thank you. I'll start with a passage that's part of the prologue of Out of Darkness. A specialist from ophthalmology, Dr. Niaz Rahman, accompanied by a junior doctor, made his way to the intensive care unit. He'd been the day before to see the patient, but the bleeding and swelling of her eyes had made any examination impossible. Romana, can you open your eyes? No? Can you see any light? No. I need to see inside your eyes. The specialist dampened a gauze pad with saline and reached down to clean the patient's eyelids of encrusted blood. She screamed and jerked back into her pillow. He was puzzled. He thought he'd barely made contact. Forgo the cleaning, he decided. Just get a look inside. With his ophthalmoscope in one hand, he reached again with the other. This time, her scream was chilling. Tears gushed from her eyes as if from a burst pipe. Neither the specialist nor the junior doctor spoke. She wanted to know, what's happened to my eyes? More tests are needed. Out of earshot of the patient, the specialist spoke to the junior doctor. Any pooling of blood inside the globe of the eye does not normally cause pain. The damage has to be extensive. What with the many road accidents in Dhaka's chaotic traffic, he'd seen horrific injuries. Once, a metal rod that split the globe of the eye. He knew vision could return after trauma, but this was the worst. Never had he seen a gouging. So that was the headline event that happened to Romana Manzoor, where she was brutally assaulted viciously in an attack by her husband that permanently blinded her. And it made headlines around the world. So I don't return to the attack until page 200 of a 300-page book. Now, my next part I'm going to read is 2 years into the marriage. Romana is a student, and she's learned 2 years in how to cope with the daily, almost beatings by her husband. When Romana's parents offered to take her and Shuman, her husband, to her favorite Chinese restaurant for her 24th birthday, Romana looked forward to it. Chinese food was a top choice among Bangladeshis for dining out. Both cuisines shared a passion for fish. For Romana to do anything social for herself was rare. Once she married, her outings with friends came to an abrupt halt. The few occasions she'd made plans to meet someone, Shuman pouted. "Oh, so they're more important than me?" Or, as she dressed to leave, denigrated her or started a quarrel. Miserable to the point of tears, she knew that she wouldn't be good company. Better that she stay home. The couple's only social life now was with family. She and Shuman went to gatherings with his side of the family, but they soon missed more with her family than they attended. Or Shuman could be planning to join Romana, but at the last minute change his mind. Romana became skilled at making excuses for why she was canceling or appearing alone. A couple hours before Romana's father and mother were to pick them up, Shuman, as Romana could have predicted, started mumbling about not wanting them to go out. Tired of making excuses for why they couldn't attend, she began to protest, saying she was keen to go. What came next, she didn't see coming. She crumpled to the floor. Shuman's vicious kick had landed on the left side of her back. Romana moaned and struggled to catch her breath. She started to cry. This was pain she could not ignore. "Don't be such a drama queen." Shuman turned his back on her and walked out of the bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Eventually, the pain subsided enough that Romana felt she could get off the cold floor. But weighed down by self-pity, she stayed where she had fallen. At the sound of the bedroom door opening, she renewed her crying, louder now. Shuman stood over her. "Stop pretending. Get up." He held out the portable phone. "Call your mother. Cancel the dinner." Romana rolled onto all fours and with enormous effort pushed herself up. She told her mother that she had a major assignment due that she hadn't finished, and therefore they couldn't make dinner. I'm now going to read 5 years into the marriage, and by now they have a child. And Romana has graduated from university, and she's a lecturer at the country's most renowned university, Dhaka University. And you can tell by the fact that they've had a child now that marriage is up and down. There's abuse. She's still trying to be a good wife. She thinks maybe he's normal again. So she's really confused within the walls of her marriage. She's living with her in-laws. The baby's name is Anushe. Anushe's whimpering stirred Romana from sleep. She looked at the clock. It was 3 in the morning. At 8 months, Anushe was still not sleeping well. Romana picked her up from the bedside crib and tried to nurse her. Anushe was uninterested and now wide awake. Romana contemplated taking her to the lounge, but no, it would be stifling hot there. In August, it can take until morning for the outside temperature to drop even 1 degree. Besides, moving the baby back and forth from air conditioning might cause her to catch a draft. Suddenly, the bed jolted violently. Anushe jerked in her arms, wailed, and began to cry. By Shuman's rigid posture beside her, Romana knew he was feigning sleep. They both knew what he had done. Romana felt a wave of disgust. Why did I have a child with this person? By the light of morning, she had made up her mind. Shuman's kick had glanced off Anushe's diapered buttocks. But she had to protect her daughter. She told Schumann that she and Anousheh were leaving that morning for her parents. When Schumann said he'd join them, Romana did not argue. Schumann would dare not misbehave, living with her father under the same roof. Both sets of parents accepted Romana's explanation of why she and Schumann and the baby were moving homes. Her work was piling up at the university, and she needed her mother's help with the baby. The part about her work was true. On top of her teaching, she was up against a deadline to finish a paper slated for publication in a journal about global security and underdevelopment in failed states. In their second month at her parents', Schumann began pestering Romana for them to return to his parents. My parents deserve to see their granddaughter grow up. 4 months in, he demanded that they leave. Romana told her mother that they were returning to her in-laws the next day. Upset at the suddenness, Romana's mother asked why. Schumann's having problems with his business. What kind of problems? Romana pleaded ignorance. Better that than say more and appear to be hiding something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all four of you. It's just amazing to hear you read, putting me back inside your books and those powerful experiences. So I've prepared a number of questions on the theme of recovery with an eye to putting the 4 books in conversation with one another. And as I ask them, I'll invite you either to respond directly, or if it just sparks something that you kind of want to jump from rather than like meeting head on, that's cool too. And if spontaneous conversation erupts among the 4 of you and you cease to need me, that's the best of all possible occasions. So feel free to talk to one another if the possibility arises. So the topic for today's panel is recovery. To recover something, at least in one sense, is to get back something that was lost, as I said when we started, as in I recovered my grandmother's jewelry box from the fire, or the black box was recovered from the wreckage of the plane. So, what have you recovered in the writing of your book? And anybody, just jump. Jump.
I can jump. So my novel takes place over 100 years, and it's roughly looking at the trajectory of one family moving from India to East Africa. And it's about the South Asian community in Uganda and the sort of multiple experiences of forced displacement and family separation that they go through. And for me, I came to writing this book because of my own family history, which is that history, but it's something that I knew very little about. And so I think when I think about recovery in relation to this book, it was really a process of recovering family history for me. And a lot of that is recovering memory. And I think especially, this is my history, this is my ancestry, but there's so many communities like this where we're sort of written out of the capital H history. It's a very under-documented history. It's not talked about in the textbooks. We didn't learn about it in school, all of that, but it was something that I knew about. And so being able to kind of go through the process of speaking to community that had been through these experiences and speaking to my own family and sort of recovering those experiences, those stories, and being able to then, attempt to turn that into a novel. I think it was this sort of recovery of lineage, of ancestry, and of silence.
Thank you. Yeah.
I swear I work in theater.
that suggestion. Well, I would say that when I think of recovery, I think that you can recover something through an act of writing. So it may be, let's say it's a lost item, like you mentioned something lost in a fire. So you can't go back to that item, but you can recreate it and recover it through an act of writing. But that act of writing, of recovery, even of history, is fraught because it's, a certain lens, and I think you talk about it later, Larissa, it's the fickleness of memory. So I once likened it to, but it's like a painting with many layers of light, and it depends on, whose light illuminates it. So recovery is maybe the intent, but the act of it can be quite fraught.
Larissa, I really love the mention of black box because it just conjures up all these, this act of preemptively protecting something that is meant to be recoverable. And I think about how in a lot of our lives, we don't have the automatic black box engineered into our lives. And I often think about how much of our present day will be tangible or remain to, say, future historians or archaeologists. And it's very humbling to me, even just to have that process. And so for me, kind of echoing what Denise, this process, I guess I didn't really have a plan when I was writing this book, and I really took it one step at a time. So it was really a learning, really a lot of it was learning about myself. But it was also learning this process of coming into the sort of like the child's process of understanding, starting with a very self-centered world and then moving out, sort of outward toward the world, maybe one person at a time, one generation at a time. And of course, this is the process of understanding history, starting to understand history. But for me, I kind of relived this developmental process of starting from ground zero with what I know, and then to push outward, a little at a time.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I work in a theater context, so maybe less access to kind of a process in terms of how it's prescribed. But one thing that is so interesting what you're saying, Denise, in terms of the act of writing being recovery. I almost invariably, for most of my plays and operas, I write the last scene first, and it often is intact in the way that it comes out, and in that way. And I sometimes do not know what the heck happens before that, but I know how it ends. I know the image or the emotion that's coming through. So it's super interesting. There's some plays that come very quickly after that moment of understanding that moment, and some plays that are take a longer journey of recovery in that way. But I believe in some aspect of that it is some generational memory that's in my body that I don't understand or fully kind of have access to, except through an emotional either response or through some collective kind of memory that we hold somewhere, and because then full-formed characters come through, and I don't know that I hold those people in my mind, but they come through after landing on an image that helps make that concrete, and very concrete form. Theater has to live on a stage, so there's a relationship towards that action of recovery, of writing, that I find so fascinating to hear you articulate. So,
thank you so much for that, all four of you. Amazing answers, and I think it kicks the conversation off really well. Marjorie, your last answer leads directly into my next question, which is about the nature of research. So you're talking about, there's something that we carry in the body, arguably that carrying as a mode of research. I would like to hear about everybody's research process. So it may be, indeed, this is one aspect of it. Some of us may, well, maybe I'll let you tell me what you do. Go to the library, perhaps you talk to other people. The other thing that I also want us to note as we're unfolding the conversation is that there's 3 different genres. The writers in this panel are working in 3 different genres. And insofar as the different genre practices might rise to the surface, I'm really interested in that because I think the different genres call to us to do the work in slightly different kinds of ways, which I find very fascinating. May as well take advantage of the fact, right? We have a playwright, we have a biographer, and then 2 novelists at the table. I place it in your hand because your hand is the closest. And there's another hand down there close as well. Yeah.
I'm the nonfiction writer you refer to. And Larissa, you talked about genres. I've always told myself that there is really only one difference that is important to me between fiction and nonfiction. And that is that in fiction, somebody else gave birth to the characters. So, and that's the difference for me in nonfiction. The purpose of my research ultimately is to inhabit my characters. So my research goes deep into that, so that when I write on the page, by the time I wrestled the words to the page, I'm almost inside their inner thoughts. So in that sense, it allows me to return to what my instinct is as a storyteller. And I'll just make one more comment before I pass the mic on.
But Denise, you also did interviews, right?
Yes. Larissa said you also did interviews. Yes. So this is where, obviously memory comes in. So I interview a multitude of people. I ask them questions until they just beg me to go away. But so there I'm knitting their own flawed memories. And I'm like, and they're often contradictory, but that's human nature. You're really getting at what the human nature is when you find contradiction. So as the writer, you're weighing evidence and deciding where to go. But ultimately, my research is in my own, what I don't know. Because ultimately, I'm the one who's going to decide the course of the narrative and what I'm trying to explore. And so it's as much my research as it is coming from that person. And it's often my research that has to be done to trigger a memory or find the doorway into that labyrinth of memory for that person. And it might be as simple as, tasting a mango lassi and therefore putting that in the person's mind that they're having that at breakfast and a memory comes. So it's also into my unknown.
Jenny, could I ask you to follow this? Because I sort of feel like there's a direct conversation. Sorry, I'm just asking Janica if she'll follow up because there's a direct connection, I think, in her work to Denise's.
Yeah, I really resonate, Denise, with what you're saying about kind of writing into this unknown in your own mind and your own self, because that was very much the case for me too, where, I mentioned that this was my own family history, but it was also something that we were very silent about. My family really didn't talk about it because of trauma, because of loss. And so there were so many unknowns and so many questions for me. And that was really my kind of entry point, and my line of inquiry was wanting to understand, feeling like I knew, there were certain things I knew very intuitively, because this is my family, this is my culture, and language. And then there were so many pieces that I just did not know. And to research it at the start, I was really focused on book research, journal articles, archives, whatever I could find, because we didn't talk about it in my family. And so I was very nervous to do that. I didn't want to break that ice myself, because I felt like my family has buried this for a reason. And so who am I to, you know, come in and you know, the privileged one saying, oh, let's talk about these things that you don't want to talk about. But then, of course, as I got further into that book research, it became very clear to me that there was very little documented. There was very little available because this is a history that hasn't been written about. And so I realized, okay, I actually have to talk to people. I have to talk to my family. I have to talk to my community. And that's really where the world of my research and the world of this book opened up when I started having those conversations with family and community. And it was very much a collective process at that point, which I think in the end was so important and really reflected in the novel, because that collective voice really goes against this Western understanding of archive, right, which is really this sort of individual hero narrative, and being able to speak across generations, speaking to elders, was so hugely important to writing this book in the end.
So even what the history is really depends on who's speaking it. Linda, Marjorie, right? Both of you have multiple voices at work in your books as well. Would you like to sort of take up that thread of multiple voices and speak to the research in that way?
Yeah, sure. But first, I will, have a qualifier for. I always get a little uneasy when I use the word research for my novel, sure. And not, but only because when I talk about the novel, I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm wearing a different hat from my other professional life, in which we talk about research in a particular way in this library, and so for me, the research that is the counterpart of research that I conduct in my professional life as a scholar is more trying to get at an imaginative truth rather than the kind of research that I do in my scholarly life. And that imaginative truth requires a whole new different set of skills and fortitude, I would say, and tools, and part of it is it's a different kind of humbling myself to the unknown, and so I think different, perhaps a little bit more distinct from Yanika's novel. My novel is not so strongly based on my own family. And so part of it was for me to step back from my own experience, well, not even my own, but just even my family's experience, and to acquire that distance that is, for me, essential to being the novelist, which is to kind of forget the I as much as possible as I enter that world. I mean, the I will always, me, my ego and everything that comes with it will always be present, but there is a preliminary process where I feel that I need to forget that even just temporarily in order to allow the process of knowing and asking questions to take place. So my research, so quote unquote research, is really palpating that shape of questions to ask in order to get to a point where I can ask them.
It's a beautiful answer, thank you.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to hear so many similarities and the way to navigate through if you're writing about things that do have historical basis, and which some of my other plays do more strongly than this particular one. But I would say as an active art form, part of the work is also in the interviews and conversations with people. Ultimately, I think I write about people, fascinated by people. But part of it is, for me, some reflection back from a community I might be writing about, who may, I may share work in early stages, with a sex worker, for instance, and have them reflect back to me kind of where it sits in terms of how they perceive that piece. And I think to me, especially when I'm reaching beyond experiences that are not myself and trying to create an authentic, embodied character on stage, even though it's fiction, it's theater, that I still want to have some grounding to that character so that that community feels reflective, even, in spite of where the play might go in terms of the plot or whatever, that they can still hold that. So that's an important maybe component for me, that there's a back and forth, because the responsibility to put a character in space talking to other people, it's a different, it's so immediate, there's a different aspect than maybe holding it back, being able for someone to process it themselves. It's so aggressive in some ways. So that would be in addition to kind of my process that's maybe specific to theater that for me.
Larissa, you said, what interviews did you do? And Yannicka talked about speaking to people. It's, the research is so multifaceted. Like when I go to Bangladesh, part of my research is I'm going into bookstores, I'm getting books on idioms, I'm reading idioms, I'm buying cookbooks, I'm eating the food, I'm dressed like a local. So this inhabiting a character takes, it takes all your senses. It's not just, sitting and interviewing and transcribing, but also sometimes the most important thing when you're interviewing people is not what they say, it's their body language. It's what they're wearing, it's how they react to your question. So, and it's the hand gestures that they use. So it's all of that. Sometimes the questions are almost irrelevant. It's what you're observing while you're talking to them.
The body is so much a part of it, Denise, is what I'm hearing. That it's that there's something of the work of inhabitation in this thing that I've been calling research, but I'll take it in a second and turn it. I just wanted to follow up with Marjorie a little bit, because I'm getting the sense that you talk to people, but how do you do it? Do you have workshops? What do you?
So it's different for different processes, but typically a play might have a few workshops, and in those settings kind of invite different artists to come to it, designers, and that may all be a part of how the play progresses and what's working. A play is able to be read, but it doesn't live until it gets that interpretive stage. It could be in those moments that we would also invite community members to also reflect back. It also is in my early stages of I'm writing something very specific, and I will work with or engage with someone maybe from some specific world. And very similar to Denise, sometimes I have very general questions, and it's not really about the general questions. I'm not looking for story. I know what the story is. I'm wanting to make sure that what I'm experiencing from this person is what's being reflected, so that it holds some authenticity without being specific to that story. That's not, my work is not documentary that way, so it's more about trying to understand that character. I am looking for Chinese hockey billet families to interview if anyone knows anyone. I still need a few interviews. So it's part of my thing of engaging in that community, and I'll pay for Zoom interviews and things like this, or meet them at Tim Hortons and kind of have these conversations. So yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Leads into the last, but this is still my first question, where I'm still just talking about retrieving what's been lost. So what's coming up for me, it seems to be coming up organically from the conversation, but it's this question then of truth, the truth of the art. What is the nature of truth for you in this work of recovery? And then how do you get to it, and how do you know when you've arrived there?
love this question, and I think, Linda, when you were talking about this idea of the imaginative truth, that made me think that for me, when I was writing this book, it is based on history and, real experiences, but it's based in a time and a place that I've never experienced. The book opens in 1898 and it ends before I was born. And so I really had to, think about that I'm writing these places I've never lived in, Uganda, Kenya, and I'm writing a community that I never got to experience, and also it's a community that no longer exists because the community of South Asians in Uganda was expelled. It's scattered all across the world. It no longer exists by design. And it's an exiled community, so the community can't return. And so it's something that I couldn't research in that way that Denise, you're describing of, going there and experiencing it. So I knew there were things I was going to get wrong. Like the factual truth, I did my very best to do justice to, but I also knew that there were certain parts of it that I would not get right. And I think for me, I had to give myself that permission, knowing that what I was really writing was in service of the emotional truth. So maybe I won't get, thinking about this apartment complex that a family like the one in this novel would have lived in Kampala. Maybe I won't get every, piece of that apartment complex correct, but do I capture the feeling of what it was like to live there? And, when the dictator made his announcement expelling South Asians, the feeling of people coming out of their doors and kind of conferring, like, did I get the emotional truth right? And ultimately, I think that gave me permission to write more freely and to imagine what I couldn't, what I couldn't fill in through memory and research. And also, I think there's the part that is, there's also in recovery work, I think there is some grief as well, that not everything can be recovered, right? There's like certain memories, aspects of experience that I will just never know. And I think I did have to grieve that because it is something that is so connected to my own ancestry and something that I had so many questions about. And but I think that's the beauty of fiction and imagination, is it sort of allows us to move into that space even if we can't learn it through the research.
Linda, for you it really is a follow-up, because you're already talking about these two different kinds of truth practices that you're engaging in. Please.
Yeah, and this is such a wonderful question because there's so many ways to answer that, and of course I love your answer about what that process means, that the emotional truth, which is kind of a contiguous truth to the imaginative truth, and acknowledging that you cannot get to the absolute. And for me, I'm reiterating some of these things, but another important part of this, because I was in my undergraduate days, I was trained as a scientist, and then I have my professional life in which I do scholarly work, and what I loved about the process, one of my favorite things about this process of trying to get at an imaginative, emotional truth, was actually discovering laughter in the process, trying to write scenes that are actually hopefully funny, and I think writing about the period of the Cultural Revolution is particularly important because there is a very monolithic way it is often written about, and I felt that was important to me to unearth the ridiculous and the humorous in those 10 years of trauma, but nonetheless there was humor and there was different kinds of laughter, and so that was part of it for me.
I think that there's a narrow truth as I would describe it, and then there's a wider truth. And so the narrow truths are you do your best, and you're right. Sometimes you'll never know them. For example, the husband of Romana Manzoor was finally arrested but never charged, died in custody. So I can't interview him, and I have to do. I'm very mindful the dead can't speak for themselves. I kept, reminding myself of Annie Dillard's quote: "Literature is an art, but it's not a martial art. It's no place to launch an attack against those who can't defend themselves." So that's the narrow truth. But when you're pursuing the wider truth, when I start as a writer, I go in with the idea that I'm prepared, and I want even to have things turned on its head. I want to have things upended. Or in other words, I remember early on reading George Orwell had a quote, "Every time I sit down to write, I write to expose a lie," which is kind of the same thing. I'm prepared to have my thinking turned on its head in service of that wider, either imaginative or emotional truth or whatever theme you're trying to explore.
Thank you. Thank you. Those reflections are so incredible. And I just think about the emotional truth a lot. That's primarily the world I work in with some of the fascinating people. And the idea of what the narrow truth is and the wider truth. In some contexts that I work through that's a colonized way of looking at it, of the very narrow truth. And then the wider truth as a decolonized way of looking at things, where there's an expansion, where we're holding narratives that are elliptical and return on themselves to tell us another truth or another aspect of that truth. So I try to hold that as well, that those multitudes do exist and are a wider, more expansive way of thinking about it. I do sometimes, some of my plays delve more deeply into historical context and will continue to do so. And so sometimes when there's a touch of something where someone from the audience says, "Oh, Marjorie, thank you so much for your play. It's just interesting. You mentioned that bird. I'm not sure that bird would have been there in that month." And I say, "Thank you for coming. Can I buy you a drink?" And then that's it. It's good to know it, and I take that. But in a way, somehow that I wanted people to hold an emotional truth through that scene, and that's fine if that was a detail that derailed them from that. It's good to know that, but I always just say thank you.
Friends, so finally we've answered, the first question has been answered. It's always like this. I'm close to time, but I do want to get at the second sense of recover, if folks don't mind, around on the other meaning of the term, which is to get better. So recovery can mean to get better. So as a society, for instance, those of us who didn't lose our lives are recovering from the COVID epidemic. But I want to ask you, because I know that there is in all 4 books, but I'll ask you anyway, if there's an illness or an injury, real or metaphorical, at the root of your project, what is the nature of that illness or injury? And then how does your work help the readership heal, if that is the goal? And if not healing, what do you think your book does to address the harms of the past?
Just in case you thought it was
Just a small question. I can speak to this a little bit. It's all complicated because my play came out, was produced in February 2020, and subsequently, as you know, something happened in March and everything shut down. And for many people in the Toronto theatre community, many people came up to me in those subsequent years, or through Zoom or whatever, and said, "Your play was the last play that I saw," which is it was quite emotional for me to hear that and to hold that some people held that for several years as the last play. There's also something, I think my bio references some of the work that I do that's like more care-based, accessibility-based. There's also a conversation of like what kind of care you should have when you're presenting your works, and I think different in a live context. In reality, the play, this character you met, Penny or Lulu, suffered an enormous, horrific gang rape that is not depicted in the piece. But then we understand why her life starts to fall apart and why she doesn't have the capacity to be able to hold the things that she needs to hold and conduct herself in a way, and she starts to get into trouble for that reason and starts to alienate her from the community. And I was very cognizant of like, it's a brutal thing to represent. And in fact, in the content warnings for this particular play, I wrote a little bit, and I said, I'm gonna tell you that these are the hard things that are part of this play. This is what happens. These are women in contemporary 2005 Vancouver. Horrible things are happening to these women. Some of them survive, some of them thrive, some of them figure it out, some of them find allies. Not all of them do, and not all of them make it. These are the hard things. I said, I'm the playwright, and I'm asking you, if you don't feel prepared to be in this room and be able to hold this and do so safely, I'm really okay. You can leave. The theater will give you back your money and you can leave. It's more important for me that you can experience this piece from a safe place than for me to have you in the theater and be perhaps triggered or re-traumatized or harmed in such a way. That's not what we want to hold. And subsequently, part of this piece is that initially there was just like 1 or 2 talkbacks that were scheduled into the show. It sold very well, and it was sold out, and so we put in a talkback every night because people did need to sit with their grief and with the experience of the show, and it was on us as a theater. This was at Factory Theater, but on us as the artist presenting it to make sure we're not just like booting people into the night after an emotional experience. So I don't know if I answered your question. I don't know if the play is to heal or to reveal, but structurally, I think there's a responsibility to hold that so that people could properly be in space and experience it.
My first book, The Concubine's Children, the concubine was my grandmother, and of course among the children was my mother, and it was a difficult family history to recover. It was divided between China and Canada and 2 wives and never going back, and suppressed history. So, and the trial was trying to get my mother to talk. So I do remember one of my very first readings, and somebody at the back of the room, as I was explaining how hard it was to make my mother talk, and somebody at the back of the room said, you know, I did exactly what you did, except I did it through therapy. And I said, oh, that's much easier. And then I've since, though, Larissa, people have come up to me and said, you know, because the Concubine's Children is actually a typical story of a generation of immigrants and family separations, the impact of the Exclusion Act. And I still get people coming up to say to me, I can't recover my family history, but I've borrowed yours as my family history and brought it into my own imagination of my family. Out of Darkness has only been out for not even 3 weeks, and I'm astonished how many will come up quietly after reading and say, I haven't told anybody, but I was in an abusive relationship. And it just stuns me, because these are people in the audience I would never know. But that's not really why you write. It's to bring the person who's never even experienced that, who lives safe and free, into that story themselves. You know, so it's not necessarily to heal that person, but you're trying to expose an illness maybe of society and bring everybody into it.
And Larissa, I love this double meaning of recovery in your question. And at first I thought that the first definition was more applicable to me, but then I've been just kind of at this moment, I've spent a lot of time in hospitals with ailing parents in the last couple of years, and so I've been thinking about hospitals and illness and treatment and healthcare for a long time, and I think that so this question is is germane to me in the second sense, and I think so many ways to answer your question, but one of the fundamental moments for me as a child was, again, this is not my family's history, but a moment that really clicked for me was an aunt of mine when I was young told me, we'll never understand the Cultural Revolution. And when she said that, she didn't mean it like in a kind of condescending way because I was a child, but she was saying actually that she will never understand it. And then another foundational moment for me came when I was when I was older. A writer actually who was in China who was known for what people called scar literature, which is this generation of writers who came of age during the Cultural Revolution and wrote about their youth and being in rural China and having been sent down from the cities. And she was one of that generation, and we were at a dinner, and she said to me, to my surprise, she says, "It's only people of your generation who could get this story, the story of the Cultural Revolution." And that it was a shocking moment because I've been living all those years with the idea that it was inexplicable even to people who were living it. So this tonight or like last night, I thought about this question, and I thought, if there was a metaphor for those 10 years of history, it's probably an autoimmune disease in which the system attacks itself. And that complexity is very interesting to me, and this is one of the reasons I've kind of been thinking about it for a long time, just because the complexity in some ways defies explanation and requires that kind of almost a distance or a removal for the questions even to be asked. And I just find that really interesting, and so thank you for
yeah, I also really love this double meaning and the idea of some kind of injury or illness at the root of the project, and it feels very apt for my novel because the first scene that came to me many years ago was a scene in 1971 when the family what the Idi Amin's military coup is just taking place, and the family is kind of processing that. And then as I, got deeper into it, I realized that this family had already been through this experience of forced displacement, exile before, in 1947 with the partition of India, and so it jumped back there, and that sort of expansion kept happening, and the question I kept asking myself was, how far back do I have to go to undo this wound? And the wound I'm talking about is the wound of family separation and forced displacement, and that ultimately took me back to 1898. And honestly, it took me back further, but eventually you have to kind of have some parameters. But that really was the root of this novel for me, and this project was thinking about this wound that was inflicted by colonialism and the ways that it continually causes this family to sort of go through these experiences of moving and being fractured. And then I think the flip side, the recovery there is, when you're thinking about this wound of being separated, this wound of being ruptured, sort of the healing, at least the way I was thinking about it, was coming back together. What does return mean? And what does return mean in the context of you can't return home, you've been exiled, you can't return to your homeland. And so then I was thinking about, what can return mean in that context? And most often in this novel, it's really a return to one another, right? The ways that the family comes back together, over time, the ways that they find sort of different kinds of collectivity, not just through family ties, but through sort of kinship, community, through social movements, and just this sort of collectivity as a sort of antidote to the separation and fracturing.
Great place to end, Jenica. It's amazing, heartbreaking book. Oh, we're so over time, and we could be here till midnight. Won't keep you. I would like to open the floor to questions. You must have questions. Here's maybe this mic.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. So, little echo, sorry. Basically, my first, I have a question of twofold, but I think the first one, maybe all four of you might be able to help me, is I'm a novelist, but I sometimes struggle with how to put the novel in a certain genre. Like, it's kind of, yes, it's suspenseful romance. There are like psychological trauma in there, family, women, all of that. But I find it difficult to kind of, and at the same time, I want to balance a sense of like hopefulness and also humor. Do you guys ever like struggle of how to kind of put yourself on the map, if I can ask that? And also the second part, sorry.
You want to try this one?
Thank you. And the second one, I wanted to ask Linda, because I kind of come from a similar background, and like my novel kind of has certain resemblance. Like it's a Hong Kong Canadian, and kind of that diaspora. And I also come from an academic background, and then I'm now switching to like being an author. So, and the novel has its like Hong Kong like political moments. So when you're writing about something like the Chinese cultural movements and so on and so forth, do you have any fear in how you, like what and how much you're saying, and are you like artistically bound, or that's kind of my question. Thank you.
So I'm essentially hearing two questions. The first is, how do you frame a novel project or a creative project? How do you frame it? Generically, but perhaps also narratively, you could help with that. Right. So how do you frame it? How do you decide how you're going to focus it? And then how do you address a difficult present that emerges from a difficult past? Do I have you? Is that right? Close enough?
I think just a small note on the first question is, in my view, I think, everything you're talking about with the different layers of your novel, it sounds fascinating. And I think those sort of genre boundaries and categories, that to me is like, that's the marketing side. That's the side that is imposed on the book, once it gets to that stage of working with a publishing house. And that's, I want to say that's sort of their job to figure out where it fits. And your job is to write the story that feels right for you. And, trusting that readers will resonate with the many facets of the novel that you're writing. So, it might be different across different genres, but I think, at least, speaking as a first-time novelist, it felt like, yeah, leave that to the marketing, like leave that to the publishing team, you know, and at least in the stage where you're writing the book, really just focusing on the story that you're trying to tell and the craft, and not worrying about the sort of external labels and the reception of it, which will all come. Yeah.
I'll just say that I completely agree. It's really it's a tough job writing a novel, and you're doing so much work already just getting the story down on the page that you don't need to censor yourself at this point. There's enough internal censors as creative writers or writers of any kind going on that you don't need to add another one. So just do the best you can as that process unfolds.
Yes, I'll add that you don't want anybody to produce your work other than yourself. So you're not, you know, a genre is like maybe trying to slot you into a niche. And I mean, I don't even show, I'm the kind of writer that doesn't show anybody my work. I might just before it goes to copy edit because I need an expert opinion, but you're not, you know, you show it, my idea is if I show it to someone, you know, they're going to tell me the book they would write. And I don't want anybody to produce their work because it's got to come from you and nobody else. So when you start worrying about those things, you're going to end up going off the deep end. You got to stay true to what you're in. You got to wrestle it with it yourself.
Yes, just to echo all of that, they'll always encourage a writer to find their own voice. And it sounds mysterious, but it is kind of thinking inside of that and letting that go through. And just to add, like, you're speaking of, like, balancing kind of literary kind of aspects as well as commercial success. First of all, I don't know anything about commercial success. Let's just be clear. Come on, let's just be clear. But I think, you know, I think what I'm trying to say is that when something resonates, it will resonate and it will find its readers or its audience. And so you have to spend the time making sure that you're saying what you want to say so that it will resonate. And again, you can't worry about commercial success. And when you let it go, it's very freeing, I have to say.
So much wisdom at this table. We're pretty much at time, but I'll take one more. Okay, can I take, how about I'll hear them both, and then we'll answer them both together.
Thank you. I just came from the Vancouver Literary Asian Fest, and that they're in their 12th year. I know this is the second year. I wonder what your connection was with them. I had talked to Alan Cho, and he said that the plan was to have a Literary Asian Fest in every province across Canada in May. And I just wondered what your ties were and if you're going to continue on having your fest.
I think maybe Hannah can probably best answer.
Yeah, so the plan for the wider expansion of the LiterASIAN is aimed for next year. So this year is happening here, but next year, Ellen and I, we discussed a little bit about next year's plan, and he did mention about extension to Montreal and Calgary and some other cities, if possible. Funding is another matter, but we will be looking into it. But definitely it's happening here in Toronto again in 2025. But there will be other cities celebrating it as well.
This is very exciting. So as a longtime Vancouverite, I'm familiar with it as a longtime Vancouver thing. So it's nice to arrive in Toronto and meet it as it's blossoming here. We'll take one last question from the young man in the blue shirt. I don't know if it's a blue shirt, a black shirt? Blue.
Hi, my name is Tian Yang, and I go by Joe. I have more of a comment than a question.
Would you mind speaking right here because it's interfering with the speaker?
My name is Tian Yang, and I go by Joe. I have more of a comment than a question, really. I am a graduate of U of T myself, and a new graduate of Western University's Master of Library and Information Science program. As an aspiring library professional, I recognize that we are living in a world of division. As Danica mentioned, we are unfortunately currently seeing, for instance, that the current conflict in Gaza causing many to be displaced and suffering. We also see that globally conservatism is on the rise, and censorship and book bans are unfortunately also on the rise. But just being here today and seeing all of our amazing authors engaging with their the communities that they write about, and sharing with us these powerful stories and discussions make me think that there is hope and there is a path to recovery. And I really appreciate both our authors and all of our organizers, including Hannah, Larissa, and the others, for organizing this and giving us the chance to hear about these powerful stories and think about these important discussions.
That may be the absolute perfect note on which to end. Thank you so much for your kind words. 3 cheers for the librarians. I know how much work you do to keep books alive, and so important. You're right, Joe, in these times when, we can't take books and we can't take the good kind of freedom of speech for granted. And at a time when many people are struggling just to live, right? Thank you for your good words. Would anybody else like to say a last thing? We could just call it otherwise. Go have a coffee, have a visit. Yes, okay. Thank you all so much. Please come to the back and have a coffee and look at books. And I'm sure the writers will be happy to stick around and sign books for you if you'd like, or just to chat. All right. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.